And now we go back to our Brisbane studio where we're joined by the former Queensland Labor Premier Peter Beattie. And look, I did say earlier you've been watching this whole thing with despair. Has your despair increased tonight as a succession of Labor cabinet ministers have been trashing Kevin Rudd's reputation?
Look, I think that the whole issue, frankly, needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. And I'm delighted that there's going to be a caucus ballot on Monday so that we can do what happens in Australia, the Australian way. We can have a resolution to this. Because you've got to remember, Tony, right in the middle of all this, we've got a thing called the Queensland election. And ever since it started last Saturday, the issue about federal leadership has basically drowned out the message from Anna Bligh as she tries to get re-elected. We've been bleeding here, and we will continue to bleed until the caucus votes and there is a clear winner. And that has to be done as soon as possible. Now, I like Doug Cameron, but if he thinks this can wait until next Friday, he's dreaming. I just remind him that there is a state election in Queensland where the Labor Premier, Anna Bligh, is trying to come back from difficult polls, trying to rebuild, and every time that happens, the oxygen is sucked out because of federal leadership. Now, that's going to continue until Monday. Let's hope after Monday it finishes. It's over.
How can you imagine it will be over after Monday when you've seen this level of savage bloodletting? I mean, people's reputations. A former Labor Prime Minister who won an historic election against John Howard is now being referred to as incompetent.
Tony, I've been in the Labor Party something like 37 years, and one thing I know, notwithstanding the difficulties and the intensity of feelings and emotions that are happening here, once there is a ballot, people will rally behind the leader that's elected. Now, bearing in mind the history of this, I understand exactly what you're saying, but the bottom line is there will be a cleansing ballot on Monday, and whoever loses this ballot should leave the ministry and indeed take a back seat and exit politics.
Well, I mean, there is another possibility, and that is if Kevin Rudd loses really badly, he could actually cause a by-election by simply retiring.
I don't think that'll happen. I mean, Kevin Rudd is not the sort of person who's going to bring down a Labor government. I mean, he's got a sense of history about him. He understands that his legacy would be regarded with a huge black mark if he left his seat, resigned and left the parliament, forcing the government to a by-election which it could lose. Then he would know that that would not be very endearing to his legacy. He won't do that.
Now, having seen the attacks, though, on him, starting with Simon Crean, then the release of the video, and now other ministers coming out saying that he was essentially no good as a Prime Minister and they wouldn't want to serve under him again. Can you really imagine that all this is going to settle down if he loses a ballot on Monday?
Look, I know that there will be strong feelings that will continue, but what will happen is people will subdue those feelings in the interests of the government, in the interests of the country, in the interests of the Labor Party.
But they haven't. At the end of the day, my point is they haven't subdued the feelings since Kevin Rudd was deposed before he got to face a second election. So if they haven't managed to do that then, what makes you think they'll do it now?
Because at the end of the day, the War of the Roses had to end sooner or later. And this has to end sooner or later. With that background that you've talked about, that level of intensity, I think people will get to the point on Monday where there will be a sense of relief that there is a decision being made. People also know that there's a federal election 17 months away. And they also know that if this continues, then Tony Abbott will win. Right at the moment, the people who are absolutely delighted by what's going on are Tony Abbott, Campbell Newman, who's the leader of the LNP in Queensland, who's trying to become the Premier of this state. They're delighted. I mean, I guess Campbell Newman is surprised to find that there are some federal members of the caucus who've actually been campaigning for him, in effect. So that's got to end so that the Queensland Labor Party has an opportunity to rebuild its vote. Now, look, I've been, as I said, a member of the Labor Party for 37 years, Tony. I live in an optimistic spirit that after Monday everyone will accept it. And I just say to the federal caucus, for God's sake, after Monday, everybody accept the decision, turn the page and actually get on with it.
Well, I've got to raise this with you because you mentioned the War of the Roses. I mean, do you know how many people actually died in the Wars of the Roses? How many leaders had their heads cut off? How many were savaged? How many were murdered? How much bloodshed there was? Why won't it be like that?
Well, it has been like that, and it's about to end. It has been exactly like that. If you want to equate it to political terms, that's exactly what's been going on, and now we're at the end of it. And that's why Monday is a crucial date It's a cleansing. It's an opportunity to move on.
Well,
Tony,
I'll just put one scenario to you, because it might not be a cleansing at all. I mean, you just heard Doug Cameron say there should not be a ballot on Monday because Kevin Rudd's been taken by surprise while he's out of the country. He thinks people have orchestrated this against him in a clearly sort of stealthy way. That's what he's suggesting. So I've got to ask you this. If he simply doesn't stand in that ballot on Monday but goes to the backbench, Julia Gillard gets a vote that means nothing.
Well, firstly, let's deal with the point about moving it on. You can't, with the Queensland election on, you cannot allow this to go until next Friday. Otherwise, Adam Bligh Miles will go home. I mean, I just remind our federal colleagues that there is a Queensland state election on, and if we lose a whole pack of seats here, they will pay the price for that when the federal election comes around in 17 months. That's the first point. The second point is, if Kevin decides not to stand on Monday, then that's the end of it. I think the judgment will be that he didn't have the numbers and he decided to accept Julia Gillard's leadership. I don't care how this happens on Monday. If there's a ballot, then there's a clear outcome. If he doesn't run, he's accepting Julia Gillard as the Prime Minister and leader of the Labor Party until the next federal election. It's that simple.
What if the comparison polls come out and clearly show that he's the leader who could beat Tony Abbott, as he himself seems to be suggesting? What should the Labor Party do then?
I think on Monday people will vote on who they think is the best person to deliver the best policies in the interests of the country. And I don't think the polls, frankly, yes, they'll come out, you're absolutely right, but I don't think they're going to shift too many votes on Monday.
And you can be quite sure of that, because what I'm really wondering here, because you saw Kevin Rudd appeal directly to the Australian voters, almost over the heads of his own party. He said quite clearly that he was a popularly elected Prime Minister. We know the parliamentary system doesn't work like that, but then that's a kind of fiction because we also run presidential-style campaigns. So, I mean, why is the public still on Kevin Rudd's side to a large degree, do you believe?
Look, just before we deal with that, Tony, the fact is, of course, both sides are going to put their best argument. Kevin's putting his best argument. You'll have those supporting the Prime Minister, Julia Gillard, will put their best argument. I mean, that's the nature of a competition, of a ballot. I'm not particularly worried about that. What I'm worried about is it being resolved on Monday. Yeah,
but I'll just go back to what I said before. If he doesn't stand because he thinks it's unfair and he leaves this hanging in the air, I know it's going to be very bad from your point of view for the Queensland election, but he's got a broader concept of Australia and who rules Australia. And why, I'll come back to my earlier question, though. Why do you think he's still so popular with the Australian voters?
Let me just deal with your first part of your question. Kevin's also a Queenslander, and he knows how important this state election is. He also knows that giving notice on Wednesday for a ballot on Monday is not unreasonable. That is a reasonable time. He's back in Brisbane on Friday. He's got telephones. He's got the best resources to talk to people. This is not as if it's a new issue. Yes, he's got to lobby people. Yes, he's got to talk to people. But Kevin's hyperactive. Everybody knows that. He doesn't sleep. He's got all Friday night. He's got, well, Friday night, Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday to get his argument in line, consult who he wants to. That is more than enough time. In terms of his popularity, Kevin has worked... any Prime Minister who defeated John Howard, as he did in 2007, will be popular. Yes, Kevin is popular. That's not the issue. The issue is who's the best person to lead Australia between now and the next federal election to deliver for the Labor government. And that's the choice that caucus has to make.
And you're advising him to vote for Julia Gillard?
I've always been a Julia Gillard supporter. I think, and I haven't changed on that, although I have to say to you, I think Kevin's been a good foreign minister. What I'm more interested in, frankly, is that the matter's resolved on Monday in the interests of Australia, in the interests of the government and in the interests of the Labor Party, and to give the Queensland branch of the Labor Party an opportunity to try and claw back its electoral position and give us a chance of winning here. Right at the moment, all this ruckus about the federal leadership gives us no chance, none at all.
Peter Beattie, we thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks, Tony.